Hello, and welcome to our family meeting, where we will be discussing the urgent needs for the improved pay and working conditions for caregivers, as well as better access to caregiving, particularly focusing on family members. My name is Devon Steele, former NFL player and father to an amazing girl named Leah. Today, I am honored to be joined in conversation with Congressman Colin Allred, representing Texas's 32nd Congressional District. To kick things off, I'd like to ask you, Congressman, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with caregiving and how has caregiving affected your life?
Well, thank you, Devin. I'm such a big fan of yours. And, for me, when talking about caregiving, it began at an early age. First of all, I was raised by a single mother. But when my grandmother got dementia and Alzheimer's later in her life, she moved in with us when I was in middle school. And my mom actually eventually retired from teaching early to care for her. And so I had that experience. But I'm also the first member of Congress to ever take paternity leave. Now, I know
Yeah.
we talk a lot about, maternity leave. Obviously, that's when, after you have a child, the mother takes some time off, but we don't have as much conversations around men taking leave to be with their kids, to be there in the early days. And I really didn't know when I was doing it that I was going to be the first member of Congress ever to take paternity leave. Now, part of that is because Congress has got a lot of old people in it. But it's also just true that we don't talk enough about men being a part of our children's lives, especially early on. I know, Devin, that's something you have been and done, and so I'm really happy to be here with you because of that. But to me, every American, every person should be able to have time to spend with their family or to have the support they need if they have a sick family member or something happens in their family. And Devin, you and I both know in the NFL, we have a 100% injury rate, meaning at some point you're going to have an injury. It might not be career ending, but you're going to have an injury. In life, we also have a 100% chance that at some point something's going to happen where you're going to need to have some flexibility and some support, either because you're welcoming a new child or because a child or a family member gets sick, or maybe just something that happens to you in your life. Caregiving impacts all of us, and that's something I've been living with all my life. But I know you have a really powerful caregiving story, and just would love it if you would share that with us today too.
As you know, being a football player, I was always on the end of receiving care, dealing with a lot of
Right.
injury, whether it's from the training staff or from my family taking care of me after surgery. But in 2014, things took a shift when my 4-year-old daughter was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma, and she was given a 50-50 chance of surviving. It completely, flipped my world upside down. And now I was on the end of being a caregiver. And I had to make a lot of tough decisions that a lot of parents in the cancer community have to make, where you have to decide whether you're going to be by your child's bedside or you're going to go back to work to make sure that you still have a home to go home to make sure you don't lose your home or your car or your lights are not turned off. And I had to make that decision to go back to work so that I had the insurance in order to take care of my daughter's treatment. And it was a very tough decision. But I realized that I wasn't the only one who had to make that decision. As I spent, months, years inside the hospital as Leah was receiving treatment, I saw the amount of kids who were in the hospital by themselves because they usually came from a single parent household. And that parent had to make that tough decision to go back to work so that they could afford the treatment or that they can afford their basic everyday needs. And I had made a decision since that moment that I was going to do everything I could to fight for caregivers, not just families who are diagnosed with childhood cancer, but people all over the world, all over the country who have to make that decision that they have to leave their loved one or can stay in the hospital or stay at home in order to take care of them.
Devin, your story is an inspiration to me. I followed it closely, and I can't tell you. I think for everybody, uh, it's been incredibly inspiring. The way you've talked about it, how the leadership you showed, and I'd like to ask you this question as well.
Mhm.
As you were going through your experience with Leah and serving as one of her caregivers, what was it that you needed during that time? What do you think the families that you've supported through your foundation need as well?
Paid care leave, because without a doubt, if I had that or I had access to health insurance, because the thing is, the reason why I had to make that decision to go back to Cincinnati to play football when Leah was getting treated in Philadelphia is I wasn't vested yet. And for those of you
Right.
who don't know what vested means is that you have to be 3 years, 3 games in before you have health care for 5 years after you retire. So my initial thought was to retire when Leah got diagnosed because there was no way I was gonna leave my daughter's bedside. Like, she needed dad to be there with her to let her know that I was gonna be okay, but I wasn't vested. So I didn't have health insurance if I made that decision to retire. So I had to go back to work and make that tough decision to not always be there with my daughter. And so many families are making that decision. In fact, I just had a mom reach out to me right now. Her son is going through brain cancer, right?
Mm.
And she has used all of her FMLA, and she
Yeah.
is completely gone, and she is trying to find loopholes to try to find a way where she can remain with her son because she's a single parent.
Yeah.
And she hasn't found one yet. So right now she's losing everything. Like, she doesn't have the money to take care of her basic needs while she's in the hospital fighting to save her son's life. And I just feel like that's so unfair that
Yeah.
although, we have a foundation where we financially assist families who are in that situation, it's like putting a Band-Aid over a wound that needs surgery, right? We do the
Yeah.
social service with our foundation, but in order to show people that they matter who are in times of need, there needs to be social change. There needs to be change at the government level to impact those families and impact those type of communities.
No, I agree.
So my question for you is, um, there's billions of dollars of investment into the care economy that is currently being negotiated in Congress as part of the Build Back Better agenda. What would be the impact of these investments across communities in the U.S.?
Well, first of all, foundations like yours are so important. But, I think we should have national policies
Yeah.
so that folks like you aren't the only ones trying to fill in those gaps,
Mhm.
for the mom that you're talking about. I mean, I was raised by a single mother. I can't imagine what would have happened if I had gotten sick because she was a teacher, didn't make a lot of money, and would have had the same, kind of difficulties that you were just talking about. What we're trying to do with this bill is to create a national paid leave program with up to 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave for all workers, which would be available through this new program. And you look around the world, we have 41 peer countries that are like ours. We're the only one that doesn't offer a national paid leave program. And we
Mhm.
know that just like in the NFL, we're going to have a 100% injury rate. At some point, you're going to get injured. At some point in life, you're going to have to need some time off of work, whether that's to welcome a new child, as my wife and I have done twice in the last few years, or to take care of a sick family member, or just to take care of yourself. You need to be able to go through that time while still earning enough money to stay afloat. You'll come back, you'll be a more productive worker, be better for our economy, and it's the right thing to do. It's not something that hurts a business to do that. You and I both know that from our time in the NFL. When a guy is going through something, having the time off to be able to come back when they're mentally right is going to overall make them a better player. It's the same thing in the rest of our economy. We're also trying to do something on childcare. We're trying to limit the cost of childcare. I mean, no matter who you are, childcare is incredibly expensive, and so we're trying to cap the cost of families in terms of how much childcare would cost them. So, for example, a family with two young kids earning the median income in Texas, where I'm from and that I represent, would save more than $17,000 a year in childcare costs if this bill goes through. And then home health care. So, we are in the midst of a crisis here, actually, because we have more than 10,000 people a day, 10,000 people turning 65 every day. And
Mhm.
so we have skyrocketing demand for folks to take care of seniors and people living with disabilities, like my grandmother when she had to move in with us and when they can no longer live independently at home. So we're trying to have a once in a generation investment in that to make sure that our home healthcare workers are well paid. There's enough of them, but that also it's affordable for the families who need them. So these things taken together would really revolutionize how families in the United States are able to get by. It's going to be a fight to get them, across the line. But I'm really, really committed to making sure that we get that done.
Yeah, you brought up a very good point that I just wanted to bring up again. You talked about how this actually boosts productivity in the workplace. People are more engaged. not only does it boost productivity in the workplace, but in society in general,
That's right.
because
Yeah.
when people feel like they matter, and when I say matter, I mean that they feel like they're valued and they feel like they add value to society, they do more, they're engaged more, right? So being able to implement something like this will show people, look, we know that sometimes life gets tough and we're going to be there for you when it does. And the morale boost that people get from that, right? The morale boost within the workplace, the morale boost that you get within society will make the world a better place for everybody. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I also wanted to ask you, you talked about how you've been fighting for this for so long, for years. What can people do to make sure that we're advocating for this policy? How can we best convince Congress to pass
Yeah.
this bill?
Well, I mean, there's no substitute. There really isn't, Devin, for reaching out to your members of Congress. And sometimes, like when I was growing up, and I'll be honest with you, when I was playing, I didn't think very much about who my member of Congress was.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, they're thinking about you. They are making policies, they're making laws that are going to impact you and your family. And so it's incumbent on us, really, to make sure that we do know who our members of Congress are and that we reach out to them, that we contact them, that we make sure they hear from us, whether you voted for them or not, whether you support them or not, they represent you and they should hear from you. And so I think every single person out there who cares about where we're going to go in terms of how we treat people, the dignity that you just said that you give people when they feel like they matter, they need to hear from us in terms of that we want to have legislation that's in line with our values as a country. And I do think this is who we are as a country, but it's not reflected in our laws right now.
Mm,
I do think that we believe that we're our brother's keeper, that we're our sister's keeper, but it's not reflected in our policies. And so we can change that with this bill that we're considering right now, the Build Back Better Act. And so I'll just encourage anybody out there to reach out to your member of Congress, reach out to your senators. Every state has two senators. You've only got one member of Congress.
mm,
They do want to hear from you, and they do track. And I know this because my office does it. They track who they're hearing from and what the percentages of are people who are supporting a bill or opposing a bill. And so it matters. Even if you feel like you're just checking a box, trust me, it matters. Tell your story. Tell the people who you represent, who represent you, why this is important to you, and try to get be a part of your democracy. President Obama used to always tell us that democracy is not a spectator sport, right? Like
mm,
you're not watching a football game. It's an active engagement, and we need to be engaged on this. So
yeah.
make sure you do that. So Devin, you do it too, brother.
Oh, I will. I will. I love that you emphasize that your congressmen or your senators are looking for you because a lot of people feel like they don't have a voice, but in fact, you do. And like you said, you have to get off the sideline and get into the game. You have to use that voice in order to create change. We can't wait on the bench. We can't wait on the sideline and expect other people to create the change that we're seeking or that we desperately need. We got to step up and make that change ourselves. And that's one of the reasons why I do the work that I do now with our foundation. That's one of the reasons why I fight for families who are battling cancer because I understood this. Although we all have a voice, my voice was much louder being an NFL player
Right.
because I was given a certain platform, right? So when I walked into the hospital and I sat down and I talked to other families who were going through what we were going through, I wanted to be a voice for the so-called voices, right? I wanted to be able to yell at the top of the mountain to let people know, look, this is what families are going through when they're battling cancer because not enough people understand. Not enough people understand that when your child is diagnosed with cancer, a, ch- a parent normally has to cut back on their hours at work or they have to quit altogether because of the frequency of doctor's visits, the frequencies of treatment. You can't keep up with your daily schedule at work. And families end up losing 40% of their annual household income due to cancer treatment work related disruption. So imagine the amount of people who are struggling without cancer, right, to pay their bills. And then you're hit with this diagnosis and you lose 40% of your income. And that's why families struggle to even get back after treatment is over. Like they're deemed unemployable because of the gap in their
Right.
work history.
Right.
They're deemed unemployable because of the absence they requested from work. And that's why bankruptcy rates are 260% higher in households with cancer compared to similar households without cancer. So families are literally losing everything while they're in the hospital fighting for their everything. And it's just not fair. Like, we need change. We need that social change in order to show not just families of the cancer community that they matter, but caregivers all around the country, to let them know we're here for you when your loved one gets sick, when you have a new child, being able to, me being a girl dad, like being there for those special moments when your child is first born and holding them in your arms and creating that bond with them is so important. So I love that you said that you were the first person in Congress to do that, because we don't really highlight the male caregivers, right? We
Mhm.
normally think of female caregivers when we're talking about that topic, but the simple fact that you took off in order to build that bond is so important. And like you said, things need to be changed at the government level so that we can show people you're human. We
That's right.
understand that life happens, and we're going to be there to support you when it does. So I'm so glad that I was able to have this conversation with you and just hear how you're fighting for us. You're fighting for caregivers all across the country, and I can't wait to hear when that bill is passed, because I know it's going to make a huge difference for a lot of people.
Well, thank you so much, Devin. Before we wrap today, I just want to ask you, you've been such a leader in your community. I've followed you from afar and seen how really the entire country, I think, has followed your lead as you've been advocating for others. How are you taking care of yourself?
That's a great question, because for so long I didn't take care of myself. I
Mm,
was focused on trying to find the purpose in my pain. And I was doing that just by fighting for other people, fighting for other families. And I basically just hit a brick wall
yeah,
where it was like, you know what? This is only going to get me but so far. It has allowed me to survive this long. Now I'm ready to thrive. So one of the things that I decided to do was just to go back to school, and I'm getting my master's in applied positive psychology, just to understand subjective well-being and human flourishing, so that I can teach myself the skills in order to not overcome my struggles and my trauma, but to deal with it and thrive. And in the midst of that, show other people who are in the cancer community or people who have just been struggling with life, period, that we are strong willed. We can overcome some of life's toughest challenges, but we have to do it as a collective. I think so many times, just because of the narrative in America, where it's like you have the chance to be successful, so many people are successful, that when people are struggling, they tend to look inward and say, man, something must be wrong with me because everybody else is
right.
successful. And I think it's unfair, because then it takes the accountability off the systems that surround us, right? They don't have to look at the systems that may be oppressing certain communities and certain
Mhm.
people. So just by showing people that you're human, you're going to go through things, and not every struggle in your life is your fault. That we have to step up as a community to let you know that, we're all going to thrive together, has been extremely important for me.
Well, I mean, you're an inspiration. You really are, and everything you said, I agree with, and I just can't thank you, Devin, still enough for joining this incredibly important conversation. And I want to say thank you to the National Domestic Workers Alliance and the Caring Across Generations for facilitating this family meeting, allow us to have this conversation. I mean, it's been important to me, I have to be honest with you. And it's been really incredible to be in this space with you here, Devin. I appreciate you, appreciate Leah and your family. And I know that wherever you go from here, you're going to do incredible things. And so thank you for being with us, and thank you all for having us.
It's my pleasure.
To learn more about the importance of investing in care infrastructure, please visit caringacross.org and domesticworkers.org.